Welcome back to the Kudlow Report. I'm Larry Kudlow. We're live here, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. First up this evening, the horrible news many of us expected but feared. Malaysia's Prime Minister says Flight 370 went down in the Indian Ocean. NBC News' Jennifer Johnson joins us now with all the details. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Larry. This is devastating news for the families of these people who were on the plane. News that was expected but still was stunning to many. Received the news, many of them via text messages, and we're told that no one on board the plane survived. The news came after new information from a British satellite company recalculating the location where the plane likely went down. This place is described as literally the end of the earth, over 1,500 miles away from Perth, Australia, in the southern part of the Indian Ocean. Apparently, Flight 370 has been sending an hourly ping to Inmarsat satellite since it went down, even though its onboard communication systems were disabled or shut off. And that's how officials were able to recalculate and determine the new location. The Prime Minister of Malaysia held a press conference saying that there are no possible landing sites anywhere near this location and to assume all the passengers on the plane are gone. This afternoon, the U.S. Navy sent its towed pinger locator called TLP-25 to Perth, Australia, where it will be loaded on a U.S. ship, and once searchers determine an approximate place to search, it'll be put on the bottom on the ocean floor to try and find the plane's black box. Now, finding that is crucial to solving the mystery of what happened to this flight. The Navy is also sending an unmanned mini submarine to search the ocean floor in that area. Relatives obviously are devastated by the news that there is no possibility this plane landed somewhere on land. Time is clearly running out to find the plane. The black box can ping for 40 days maximum. The battery usually lasts 30 days, but experts are telling us it can go as long as 40 days. But with wind and currents spreading the wreckage hundreds of miles apart, finding the actual plane's location will be very difficult, especially in the cold, icy seas of the southern Indian Ocean. Larry?
All right, Jennifer Johnson, thanks very much. Grim news, but there you have it. Right. Now, folks, world leaders getting together for the first time since Russia took over the Crimea. Russia has been kicked out of the G8. CNBC's Ann Weisbach has that story for us. Good evening, Ann.
The Nuclear Security Summit here in The Hague in the Netherlands is clearly overshadowed by recent developments in Ukraine and also steps taken by Russia. There's a lot of talk about what Russia is going to do and also which sanctions the West is going to impose on Russia. But there is also not one voice yet, because there are countries like the United States and also the UK who want harsher economic sanctions on Russia. But there are others who actually are wary about the effects on the European economy by those potential sanctions. With that, Larry, I'm sending it back over to you.
All right, many thanks, Ann Weisbach. Let's get right to it. We have Kay Bailey Hutchison, former Texas Republican senator, who's with me on the set for the full hour. We also have Texas Republican Congressman Kevin Brady, who is chairman of the Joint Economic Committee. And I think momentarily, when we get the technicals fixed, we will have former White House Chief of Staff Andy Card. But good evening to both of you. Thanks for coming around. Senator Hutchison, let me go to you first. I give Obama credit, kicking Russia out of the G8. I think he's right.
Oh, absolutely. You know, you have to give credit where credit's due. I think that we need to take that action. But, Larry, it is time for the Europeans, along with us, to be very, very serious about sanctions and alternatives to relying so heavily on Russia with this kind of behavior.
I want to get back to this Europe and sanctions issue, because I think it's absolutely the center of the issue. But Congressman Kevin Brady, let me go to you. President also announced today the 7th U.S. application for the export of natural gas. He passed that. Now, I guess the Department of Energy has to sign off on this stuff. Me, I want 25 or 30 more of these things, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's a start. Obviously, we've got a number of applications left. It sends a much stronger signal. We know that faucet doesn't start running for quite a while, but sends a strong signal. Russia, you know, I'm not normally a big fan of economic sanctions. Not enough countries join to make them effective, but Russia doesn't have a balanced economy. Energy and banking are two areas where they're vulnerable, and the signal of more natural gas flowing from the U.S., I think, is the right one.
All right, good. Senator Hutchison, come back to you. Let's go back to the sanctions issue everybody's raising. It is crucial. I've looked at this. I've looked at numbers. I've looked at everything. Yes, the Russian economy is terrible. Their stock market's down over 40% last 3 years. The currency, the ruble, I think, is down over 20% the last 3 years. As John McCain said, it's a gas station. Outside of that, it's just a gas station. That's all they got. Now, having said that, London and Germany, England and Germany, Senator Hutchinson, Russia raised $400-some-odd billion of securities in the London Stock Exchange. This is down through the years. Germany has something like 6,000 companies operating in Russia. My question to you is, can we, the United States, persuade them to join us in a real financial banking sanction?
I think what we have to do is play the natural gas card. Obviously, on the banking side, we have to be firm. I mean, look at what Putin has done, and he is just testing the waters to see how much farther he can go. The first thing we ought to do is be strengthening our NATO neighbors outside the Ukraine so that they have the capability to show strength. But secondly, we need to start right now doing natural gas contracts and gearing up to be able to export natural gas out of America, where we are close to having a surplus. We are very plentiful in this area.
It takes a law to change that. You're not allowed to export, right? Oil and gas can't be exported. Only certain distillates can be exported.
Well, there are a lot of bills in Congress right now that are trying to open it up.
We need a vote. We need a vote to do that. Vote would send hell of a signal.
I mean, it would be a huge signal. It would take away the lack of leverage that Germany has, especially 60% of German energy is coming out of Russia through Ukraine. I mean, they are being tepid, and we can see why. But if we take steps right now, and this is where I think the president could be a little more bold, and that is to say we are going to start the process right now of the export, the building up our natural gas liquefication plants so that we can start this process. And that in itself, I think, would be the one thing that Putin would listen to.
It's a big job creator. I mean, it should be a layup for him, but the Keystone should have been a layup for him, too, and he didn't do that. I've basically been supporting him in this. Putin's the really bad guy. I think the president's doing what he can do. Let me come back to the financial sanctions. Kevin Brady, you've become a monetary expert and a financial expert. Look, we can't do that alone. I mean, you want to have an end to banking with Russia the way we ended the Iranian relationships. But, as I say, in London, they've made a fortune from Russian offerings. In Germany, they've got businesses. The United States, just a quick list: Exxon, Ford, Citi, GM, Boeing, Pepsi, they're all in Russia. So what's the outlook for the sanctions thing? Because without it, I don't think we really hurt him for a while. I agree with Senator Hutchinson, down the road, the symbol. But without banking sanctions, we don't really hurt him. You know,
I agree. Traditionally, Europe likes us to play the bad guys while their contracts continue to run. That won't work in this case. The banking relationships in London, as you pointed out, the business relationships across Europe, the oligarchs and the investments they've made are numerous. The stock market relationships in London and across Europe are critical. You know, we're going to find out if Europe's serious about containing Russia with Crimea, or they're going to try to finesse some way where we continue to play the lead role. I agree with you. It won't work without them.
You've got oligarchs in the United States sending their kids to our schools. They own fancy apartment buildings. One of them owns a basketball team, professional basketball team, steel mills. We've been all through that on this program. London's even bigger. The role of the oligarchs in the London economy is even greater. I have not heard a peep. Literally, I have not heard a little bo peep out of Prime Minister David Cameron. What's he waiting for? He's at the G7 meeting now. I'm sure President Obama's talking to him, because President Obama's aides know darn well it cannot be done without London.
Well, he's not been a leader, frankly, in a number of international areas for some time. He's got an opportunity to step up, I think, play a leadership role. We'll see if he does.
We'll see if he does. What do you think? Do you ever deal with him? He's really going to... I'm impressed with Merkel. Angela Merkel, if you believe what you read, she's giving Putin hell on the phone. It's very interesting.
In Russian.
All right.
She speaks Russian.
But, yeah, that's right. Right.
Yes.
East German. So it's Cameron that I'm worried about. It's Cameron who's got to have to deliver.
Well, the bottom line that you're both making is the correct. And we saw it in Iran. When the Europeans didn't help in the boycott of Iranian products, and they were doing business with them, and they kept making a nuclear weapon. We know that. So if you don't see that as a lesson going into Russia, if we don't speak with one voice, we are going to end up with Putin going all the way in through Ukraine, and then we're going to really have the NATO alliance.
You think he's going into East Ukraine? You think he's going into East Ukraine?
Oh, I think he's absolutely. I think he is testing us, just like a 4-year-old kid, to see how far he can go before we get serious.
If we don't cut his money off, he's got us. He's got us, seriously. I mean, I don't know what the hell we're going to... We're not going to put troops in there. I mean, look, you're right. Tougher NATO, more muscular NATO posture, protect the Baltics, go for the natural gas exports. I would only add, I guess, John McCain's idea or somebody's idea, let's start renegotiating the missile defense with Poland.
Yeah, and maybe that's the key point. U.S. doesn't have to wait for Europe on everything. We can demonstrate our seriousness with the resetting, restoring that missile defense system.
But if he's got all these troops on the border, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a hole.
We could be providing some military aid to Ukraine in defense of where they're at.
All right. Hang on one second. Everybody, please stay with us. We're going to have much more to talk about, including the latest call, by the way. This is a little domestic politics. The latest call by election guru Nate Silver. He's just made a big prediction for the 2014 elections, and it's making some people on Capitol Hill steaming mad. And later on, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor will join us to talk about the Republican message for the midterm elections. For now, don't forget free market capitalism is the best path to prosperity. This special final week of the Kudlow Report, we will be coming right back.
I looked the man in the eye. I found him to be very straightforward and trustworthy. We had a very good dialogue. I was able to get a sense of his soul. He's a man deeply committed to his country and the best interests of his country.
All right, welcome back to the Kudlow Report. Back with us now, we have former White House Chief of Staff Andy Card. We continue to have Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison and Congressman Kevin Brady. Andy Card, welcome as always. Look,
good to be with you.
We played that clip. I'm not trying to embarrass you or anybody else. I'm working off of this excellent New York Times story today by Peter Baker. 3 presidents and a riddle named Putin. 3 presidents and a riddle. This guy has managed to, I don't know if hoodwink is the right word, but he kind of starts out talking, and then he goes off his own way, and he seems determined to have some kind of Euro-Asia Russian empire. Andy Carr, what do you make of Putin?
I think he's very Machiavellian. I think he's a little Napoleonic, and I think that he is conniving. I was with President Bush when President Bush did have that conversation with him, and I thought President Bush did a phenomenal job at the meeting. He had actually done more homework than the State Department or the CIA had recommended. And he actually, I think, caused President Putin to reflect on things that people didn't expect him to reflect on, including what was it like to go to your dacha after it had burned down and you found a cross in the ashes. And I remember causing President Bush to really pry into President Putin, and it was pretty effective. So I understand why President Bush said what he said. Having said that, I don't trust the guy. He's steely-eyed. He's a little bit inferiority complex. You know, my dog's bigger than your dog type of thing. He wants to be a bit of a bully and a showman. But I would recommend that President Obama seek some counsel from very wise people. People who understand what the old Soviet Union was like and what Russia today is like, and bring together, you know, the Condi Rices of the world and the Bob Gateses and the Jim Bakers and the Henry Kissingers and the Brent Scowcrofts, and have a serious conversation about what would it be like in Russia today if Putin were to try to go back to the empire days, and how should we address it? I don't think this is an easy problem to try to solve.
Right.
And clearly we don't want to have to go to World War III over it.
No, I understand that. I want to say also, in fairness to President Bush, in this Peter Baker story, and I think Peter Baker's a very good reporter, that later on, Bush is talking to Putin, and Putin says something about how he's hot-blooded. And President Bush says, no, you're cold-blooded. And I think that's closer to the truth. But I think President Obama has learned that, okay? Maybe you have to learn it the hard way. I don't know how it works. I'm not a foreign policy specialist. Andy Carr, we were talking, while we're getting you hooked up, about the issue of sanctions, and particularly financial sanctions, which really is the most immediate way, I think, to discipline Russia. Question for you, do you suppose Britain, London, where Russia raises so much of its money, and Germany, which has so many businesses in Russia, do you think they will go along with tough sanctions?
You know, I don't. In the end of the day, I don't think that they have the wherewithal to really be as tough as they should be. People are not respecting the United States today. They're not admiring the United States today, and they don't fear the United States. And that's our allies, the neutrals, and our enemies. And so I think we've got to do an awful lot to earn respect. We've got a lot to command admiration, and we've got to introduce a little fear. But it would be great for us to get Great Britain and London in particular to recognize they have to be responsible in this effort. And the same with Germany. I think they can do it, but I'm not sure that they're going to find the complete political will to stand tall because of the I'm going to say the tentacles of the economy that Russia commands through their oligarchs has reached into those markets much more than they have in the United States. Well, so I think it would be very difficult.
You're right. The oligarchs are even bigger in London. And by the way, I can't prove this, but I believe, just from what people have been writing and saying, is the oligarchs have more money deposited in London banks. Now, they got money in U.S. banks. They got money in Middle Eastern banks. They got money everywhere. But they got a lot of assets that could be seized in London. And that sort of brings me, Congressman Kevin Brady, one thought I've had all during this is that if the United States had a truly strong economy. In other words, I grew up under Reagan. Reagan outbid Gorbachev. He said, Reagan, basically, you know what? I can produce the defense goods and you can't. We're not in that position now. We're slashing our defense budget and our economy is only growing at 2%. Is it possible that Putin takes that into account?
You know, he has to. Clearly, our economic strength is not what it was. The deficits we're running, the proposed cuts to defense, send signals that we're not really ready to back up our words and to play that key role worldwide. Our economy, of course, struggling along about half the rate it should be at this point in the economic recovery. People still puzzled about how long this is going to take. Clearly, he can read our economic forecasts as well as we can.
I mean, look, Russian economy is terrible, too. They're growing about 1%. They got something like 6-7% inflation. As I said earlier, the last couple, 3 years, their stock market has fallen 45%. The currency has fallen over 20%. There's evidence that Russians are taking their money out of Russia. But I don't know with this guy Putin, who's such an arrogant son of a gun, I just don't know that he fears us in economic terms.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I think we've got to have a credibility. And drawing red lines and having them cross and doing nothing is not the way to instill fear in an adversary. We need to have our allies trust us and our enemies or adversaries maybe is a better word, respect us and know that when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it.
Putin is our enemy. Putin is our enemy. He's our enemy in Syria. He's our enemy in Iran. He's our enemy right now in Crimea and Ukraine. He's our enemy. But I think, Andy Carr, question, honest question, okay? You've been chief of staff, powerful job. You've also held other positions in the government and the private sector. It looks to me like President Obama is working pretty hard on this, all right? Whatever his past miscues, and there are many, and I have not been a supporter of his policies, it looks to me like he sees the seriousness of this and is working very hard, Andy. I want to get your take on that, please.
I think he's working hard today, but I don't think that he set the stage that was necessary for us to be able to be strong today. He did not demonstrate strong leadership around the world. He did not demonstrate, I'm going to say, follow-through when he issued challenges in Syria and other places around the world. So I think he's lost credibility. He's trying to earn it back. But I actually think he needs more wisdom. And he does not have a lot of wisdom, and that's why I would recommend he reach out to people who do have wisdom.
You want a stronger group around him, people that have old hands who have been through this before.
Yes, I want people who have been hit by the 2x4 of reality of dealing in a tough diplomatic climate with the Russians.
I'll tell you, one guy...
And make a difference.
One guy who served in both cabinets, Gates, Secretary Gates, he's a guy. He's been Putin critic from day one, never trusted Putin under anybody. Maybe that's the guy you should bring back anyway. We're flat out of time. I thank you all very much. Andrew Card, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson, Congressman Brady is going to stick with us for the whole hour. He's got a lot more work to do. He's going to tell me what the Federal Reserve is doing. I don't really understand any of that. Now, we do have a verdict in the trial of 5 former Bernie Madoff employees. We have that story for you coming up next on Kudlow. Please stay with us. Another day in the red for Wall Street. Dow fell 26 points. The S&P dropped 9, but the NASDAQ was hit the hardest, losing 51 points. Let's get straight to it with our ace investors and some very great old friends of this show. Ron Kruszewski is president and CEO of Stifel Nicholas. Michael Cugino of Permanent Portfolio Funds. Andrew Bush, author and publisher of The Bush Update. And Congressman Kevin Brady is staying with me right here on the set. Thank you to all of you. Ron Kruszewski, let me ask you something. We're at the front end of some kind of cyclical, longer-run Federal Reserve tightening, all right? However long it takes them, however they get it right or get it wrong or contradict or qualitative ease, which no one understands, interest rates are going up, right? Interest rates are going up.
Well, they're not going down for
right.
Too much, at least.
Do you think, as a strategy, this is where I'm going, do you think as a strategy in what is likely to be a rising interest rate environment that investors should shift to high dividend stocks like utilities or telecoms?
Well, you know, in a rising interest rate environment, Larry, I mean, I think those stocks will come under pressure as high-paying dividend stocks. I mean, wouldn't you think? I mean, I don't know why you would do that. I think the strategy you got to look at is interest rates being increased because economic performance is improving, and so I would be a little wary of any income investments, period, or anything that's based.
So you wouldn't be in a defensive position. A lot of people saying as you go into higher interest rates, you need to be in a defensive position.
Well, again, I would look at if the Fed is tightening because economic conditions are improving, I think you can look at a lot of sectors in addition to just dividend-paying stocks. That would not be my first choice, Larry.
All right, we're going to come back to you. And again, Andy Bush, I want you to weigh in on this. What kind of a future do you see? Do you think the American economy is going to grow faster? Do you think the Fed is going to raise interest rates sooner? Do you think profits, this to me is the key, profits are the mother's milk of stocks, do you think profits will do well?
Yeah, I think obviously the economy is going to recover from, you know, wintervention that we had, or Siberia where I live. It's been so cold, and actually it's going to snow tonight, so that's just great. But to your point, I think, yes, we're going to see a recovery, faster growth than what we've seen in the first quarter, no doubt. You know, Janet Yellen made it very clear, and actually Steve Leisman asked the best question. He asked, you know, what's the trajectory of Fed interest rates? And it's a very shallow trajectory. In other words, what the Fed is trying to do is say, look, we're done with the extraordinary measures to stimulate the economy. They're not needed. But we're not going to take that next step and raise rates aggressively. It's going to be a very slow, gradual way of raising interest rate and tighten things up. And over time, I mean, you know, the correlation between the 5-year yield and stocks generally has been positive, and they've generally moved together, and that's where you want to see demand for money pushing interest rates higher. That would be fine. I don't think we have any problem with that, and I think because of that, you would also see corporate profits grow at the same time with faster economic growth.
All right, so Mike Cugino, Andy Bush is describing a cyclical play, if I get him right, that there's going to be better economic growth and hence profits, and hence rising interest rates will accompany rising stocks. Do you believe that?
To some degree. I think that the economy is growing as much as it can given the current constraints and impediments that we have on it. And I think that's an anemic 2, somewhere in the 2% range of growth. That's not bad. Stocks can do well. Corporate profits can still grow. And you can make money, although I don't think you'll make the returns that you've seen the last 5 years or so. I don't mind gradually rising interest rates, and I think the quicker the Fed gets out of the way, the better, because that means the economy is operating on its own in a free market way without subsidies. And so I'm for that, and gradually rising rates are indicative of a growing economy. What scares me is market rates or shock factors that drive rates too quickly, too soon, that will cause the Fed to react and possibly lose the growth track that we have. And I'm not so sure we're going to have that great growth. We've all been talking about the weather, and that's the reason why the economy slowed in the first quarter. Right. I hope everybody's right, but I'm not quite buying it yet.
Congressman Brady, why should the economy take off? Seems to me there are a lot of barriers to growth.
Well, right now, I actually think normally I would cite fiscal headwinds as the biggest problem, and global as well. But I really think right now the Fed is becoming a headwind. I think the uncertainty that they're creating, they haven't moved the goalposts. They've removed it. It's eye of the beholder stuff. I think the sooner they can get to a normal interest rate, I mean, gradually, clearly they're not. We're talking sharp elbows by the Fed, but I think they're creating a great deal of uncertainty. That's why the missing ingredient still is business investment. It's still far beyond where we need to be. We ought to be 4% growth or stronger easily by now, and I think they're part of the problem.
So, Ron Kruszewski, you've heard everybody weigh in. I give you your second whack at the ball. You don't like the interest rate dividend play. Do you buy the cyclical economic growth profits play?
Yeah, look, I like the industrial sector at this point of the economic cycle, Larry. I think that, you're going to see the question is really, can we get 3% GDP growth the second half of the year? It's inventory buildup and weather. I agree with the one commentator who says that's a good excuse. I do think you can get that, but you're not going to see stocks can go up, maybe 8% from here. We do need some changes. Talk to your guy next year from Washington. We need some tax reform. We need to lower the cost of capital. We need to get entrepreneurs creating jobs. That's what's going to drive this market, Larry, not the Fed. The Fed needs to get out of the way, but that can't be the reason.
I'm totally with you. Kevin Brady, though, are we going to get this entrepreneurial rush, lower tax rates on capital, get the government out of the way? This is the problem I have. What do you think?
Well, if you heard Eric Cantor, the answer is yes. And you've been the point of this for years on this show. Free market capitalism is the best path to prosperity, lower taxes, more free trade, a sound dollar. All of those goes with the greater economy. It will, but Washington can act. I'd love to have a president that's willing to go from slow growth policies to fast growth policies.
Andy Bush, one of the great prognosticators, what's his name? It used to be with the Washington Post. Anyway, he's saying now that the Republicans have a 60% chance of capturing the Senate.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of different models that are running around. I would say there's about 11 Senate seats that are in play. Probably 8 of those are really likely to turn over to Republicans. If you're just looking at one kind of statistic, just look at the presidential approval rating. It's really low, 41 to 43%. That generally drives your kind of wave election. And I think that's what we'll get certainly in 2014. And I think it looks really well.
Nate Silver, I got to give him credit. Nate Silver.
Nate Silver was New York Times. He just started his 538 blog. But I want to make one point that on tax reform, that isn't a 2014. It's not a 2015 issue. It is absolutely a 2016 issue, and it really will come down to who is the Republican nominee, because that person has to drive this bus.
And
otherwise, it's never going to happen.
And you're not going to get it until 2017. That's earliest you can get, all right, Congressman, correct me if I'm wrong. We got to go through 2 elections. We got to have a midterm election. We got to have a White House presidential election, and then maybe the next year, if you all have a plan ready, you can get your tax reform. But it's really 2017. This is still early 2014.
Well, we know it took President Reagan some years to get it done.
Yes.
That's why we laid down the discussion draft to take the next and advance that discussion with specifics. I think it's critical that we start this year. A lot depends on these elections, yes.
All right, elections, we will see. Ron Kruszewski, Mike Cugino, and Andy Bush. We're going to wrap up the hour with Congressman Kevin Brady. I want to talk some about this massive Yellen-Fed contradictions that I think creates so much uncertainty in the financial markets. Stay with us. Much more to come.
Hey, Larry, I I still remember when I first joined CNBC, and it's been many moons ago now, but I was at the NASDAQ stock market. You put your arm around me and you said, Tommy, you're doing great. Love your work down here. It really helped give me a bit of an ego boost when I needed one down there. And ever since, I really have valued our friendship and the energy and the passion you bring to what you do. So I'm really glad you're still a part of the family at CNBC and NBC News. And I just want to say my hat's off to you. Congratulations on a great run with your show.
Larry, I love you. You taught me everything that I needed to know to do well in this business. Good luck to you. I can't wait to see you again. And it's been a great run.
Boy, there's some old pictures. All right, welcome back to the Kudlow Report. I'm Larry Kudlow. We're back here with Joint Economic Committee Chairman Kevin Brady. Let me just ask you, Kevin, I don't want to give up on this Fed story so easily because I think there's contradictions galore that are going to actually hurt the economy, maybe the stock market. On the one hand, last week she suggested they might raise the target rate a wee bit sooner and a wee bit, like a quarter, half a point, maybe in 6 months after they get out of quantitative.
Yeah.
Okay, she let that cat out of the bag. On the other hand, as John Hilsenrath reports today in the Wall Street Journal, front page story, when you look at the Fed notes, they are going to keep short-term rates below normal, even if the economy normalized. They want short-term rates too low for too long, in my opinion. How do you see it?
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that they continue down this path, even though the market, I think, is starting to gradually understand the stimulus can't go forever, easy money can't go forever, it has real consequences. And I think, too, you've made the point, and I agree, the Fed is not just juggling two bowling pins on the interest rates and bond buying, but they've got $2.5 trillion of bank reserves. They've got all the mortgage-backed securities. They have to somehow unwind all that over the midterm without fueling inflation. They're supremely confident they can. I'm not.
One of the things that troubles me, and it's funny, over the weekend on the radio show, I had Professor John Taylor on of Stanford, the author of the Taylor Rule, which was basically used for 20 years, the so-called Great Moderation period in the 80s and 90s. Now, look, there are no rules. We don't even have quantitative easing. We have qualitative easing. No one really knows a basket of job indicators that are going to be what Ms. Yellen wants them to be. To me, this fosters uncertainty. I prefer rules.
Yeah, I do, too. This is eye of the beholder. And we've always talked about clear communication from the Fed. And from your years of the Fed, you know how important it is to the market. I just don't see that happening.
You have a bill. You have a bill, quickly, in the last few months.
I do, to reform the Fed, really focus it on stabilizing the price of the dollar, really having sound money. That's the foundation for economic growth. Sooner we get to that, in my view, sooner businesses invest and the economy takes off.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Great stuff. Congressman Kevin Brady is the head of the Joint Economic Committee, has pushed sound money for quite some time. That's it for tonight's show. Thanks for watching. Our final week continues. We've got more great guests tomorrow, including Texas Governor Rick Perry. I'm Kudlow. We'll see you tomorrow night.